When we picture the witch hunts of early modern Europe, we usually jump straight to the late 1600s, places like Salem or the Scottish Highlands. But the true genesis of the European witch craze happened 2.5 centuries earlier, in 1428, and it started here. This is the Valais, a deep, geographically isolated alpine valley in modern-day Switzerland. It is beautiful, but in the 15th century, these steep mountains acted like the walls of a pressure cooker. At the center of that pressure cooker was the region's ruler, the Prince-Bishop of Sion. Since the year 999, the bishop sitting in this cathedral was the final arbiter of both a peasant's tax obligations and their eternal soul. In the Valais, the line between crime and sin vanished. Defying the government was no longer civil treason, it was prosecuted as literal heresy. By the early 1400s, that absolute authority was fracturing. The Prince-Bishop found himself trapped in the middle of a brutal multi-front war. From the west, the House of Savoy was aggressively pushing up the lower Valais, squeezing the bishop's borders. Meanwhile, in the higher altitudes of the upper Valais, independent peasant communities, known as the Seven Tithings, were staging violent rebellions, demanding local democratic rights. Trapped between an invading army and an armed peasant revolt, the isolated population of the valley was pushed to the psychological brink. Years of bloodshed and starvation cultivated deep paranoia. This geopolitical claustrophobia created a perfect incubator for mass hysteria. And when a society feels like it's collapsing from all sides, people start looking for someone to blame. In the summer of 1428, that blame found a target. Authorities in the town of Leik issued a chilling formal proclamation. Anyone slandered by just 3 or 4 neighbors could be arrested, imprisoned, and tried for sorcery. The court records, documented by chronicler Johannes Frund, read like a fever dream. Accused peasants were charged with shape-shifting into wolves to slaughter livestock and applying magical salves to their chairs so they could fly through the night. These supernatural charges closely mirrored their very real, earthly terrors. In an unforgiving alpine environment, magic provided a physical explanation for the sudden frosts or sick livestock that led to starvation. The resulting purge was merciless. Within a year and a half, the trials tore through both the French and German-speaking sides of the valley, and over 200 people were dragged to the stake and burned. In a state where church and government are one, hunting witches is an efficient political tool. It allowed a crumbling regime to terrorize its population and enforce obedience upon a fractured society. The intense witch hunts in the Valais faded after about 8 years, but the damage to the Prince-Bishop's absolute power was permanent. The peasant tithings capitalized on this institutional weakness. Operating from their fortified imam towns, they steadily eroded the bishop's authority, eventually forcing him to relinquish his secular territorial rule. The final blow to the bishopric's political dominance came centuries later, when the sweeping forces of the French Revolution arrived in 1798 and dissolved the secular state entirely. The peasants ultimately won the local independence they had fought for, but the hysteria they sparked during their 1428 rebellion had already escaped the valley. While the fires in the Valais were dying down, the meticulous court records detailing the confessions of flying chairs and weather magic were packed up and carried north to the Council of Basel in the 1430s. There, elite European theologians eagerly read through the documents. They used the Valais testimonies as hard evidence to formulate the very first academic manuals on the existence of witchcraft. Those early manuals gave intellectual legitimacy to rural superstitions. Over the next 2 centuries, they were distributed across Western Europe, fueling a devastating witch craze that would claim tens of thousands of lives. The Prince-Bishops of Sion attempted to maintain a monopoly on both secular law and spiritual truth. When that system buckled under the weight of rebellion, the resulting paranoia provided the legal blueprint for the most devastating hunts in European history.